Waiting for the live. And
What's good, party people? This is According to Woods, and as we welcome you with Jazz Hand, I have the honor of having a gentleman who has ring-announced for Impact Wrestling, New Japan, Collision, let's see, NWA, and Wrestling Pro Wrestling. He is the handsome voice, Adnan Kureishy. Adnan, how are you, brother?
I'm good, Adam. It's good to be back here. It's been almost 2 years since the last time we you interviewed me, and a lot has changed. You're looking good. Good to see that you're still healthy during this time period.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't gone Stephen King's The Thinner. I mean, that could have worked for my ever expanding waistline, but you know,
Well, it's like we're living in the mist right now. If you're talking about Stephen King, it's like no, rather best not to go outside whenever possible. And only and then try to avoid the giant bugs that are outside. Right? Yeah, there's giant bugs outside. Right? I haven't been outside
yeah,
in like
you
months.
know,
Right?
no, it's definitely the giant bugs, but I mean, in lieu of giant bugs, we have this kind of weird, I guess, airborne or not airborne disease that also might be because of bats in China and flat Earth, and I don't know, man.
Clearly, it's a flat Earth problem. This is 100% what we can chalk this up to. The Earth being flat is the whole reason why we're like this right now.
Yeah. So that's where I'm going to lend my hat to. But speaking of lending your hat, I mean, again, we spoke, the first time in almost the infancy of your career, and what you've done in the last, almost 2 years has been pretty incredible. And I mean, what do you attribute, some of your success thus far to?
One of the things that was really instilled into me during my training, because as we talked about before, I was trained by Santino Brothers Wrestling Academy under Gentleman Jervis and referee Jeremy Marcus, who is a referee for New Japan Pro Wrestling, on top of the other, great trainers at Santino Brothers like Joey and Sylvie and all that. But one of the most important things that was on the side of the dojo that unfortunately we have temporarily closed down, so I can't wait to see it again. But was a sign that said "Put in the work," and "Put in the work" was something that was very much instilled to me very early on when I started my training, and it stuck with me because, in all honesty, I found it to be the most basic and most important thing is that as long as you put in the work, you can get to where you want to get to as long as you're putting in the work. So at no point during my career have I not tried to instill in people or tried to show that I'm willing to do what needs to be done. That's what helped me get to Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, which opened a lot of doors because I was crewing and setting up the ring and stuff like that before an opportunity came, and then same with any other opportunity that came to me. So like when you said New Japan Pro Wrestling, like I just got the opportunity to do the ring announcing for Lions Break Collision on New Japan World every Friday night in July, 7 p.m. Pacific time. The reason, but before that, I'd helped out with New Japan a handful of times doing merch, doing the ring, stuff like that. Like I wasn't being used as a talent, but I was still being used to help put together New Japan, over the last few times, getting the opportunity, kind of bugging the people who I knew who were with the dojo, going like, hey, if there's ever a spot where just a hand is needed, I'm not necessarily saying where if you need an announcer or something like that, but I'm willing to help out. So that's basically what I was doing. And then lo and behold, that's what led to that particular opportunity.
Yeah, and when you mentioned, putting in the work and, especially specifically with like New Japan, I mean, I remember the last show that they had here in Long Beach, at the Pyramid, I ran into you and I ran into, Bateman, and to see where you guys are, and both, Santino Brothers train, both putting in the work, and where you guys have respectively gone, you where you are, him and, have iterations with Ring of Honor and what have you. Again, it's, nothing substitutes work. I remember when I first started kind of having the inclination of doing this, I was at Fight Academy in Pasadena and rolling with none other than Herb Dean, who is just a referee. I
Oh,
mean, the biggest
like
referee right
the
now.
most famous referee in MMA right now. So
Yes. And my goodness, I mean, talk about a gorilla with kid gloves. Like, he was just like the best, a compliment that I'm still a white belt in jiu-jitsu, forever white belt, it seems like. But with that all being said, the best advice that I got or compliment that I got from anyone was Herb Dean, literally a week after Ronda had gotten head kicked by Holly Holm and rolling, and he picks me over and we're rolling, whatever. And I feel just absolutely, utterly helpless. He's a big guy, but I mean, his technique in jiu-jitsu is just like, I mean, he's a black belt for a reason, right? And he's always
Right.
getting in work. And, he was just like, at the end of the roll, I was just like literally doubling down. I'm totally blown up and what have you. And he goes, you know what? You've rolled before, haven't you? And I'm, to this day, I can in my black belt tomorrow, but Herb Dean saying, "Hey, you've rolled before." That's all I need. That's all I need.
Right. No, yeah, it's all about putting in that work, and clearly you've been doing that, trying to get the goods from the woods here, according to Woods, getting some more like I think Good for Some Bros is a different show. We'll not plug that right now, but like according to Woods, you're starting to get like trying to build it as big as you possibly can, and I'm sure it's been a very interesting time to try and cover like the sports world and the combat sports world, especially over the last like few months, and seeing Fight Island, or as I saw on Twitter, that great stage from Tekken that I swear I fought in. Fight Island looks just like an overview passing of like a stage in Tekken or Virtual Fighter. It's the funniest thing to me.
Yeah, man. Oh, man. We'll get into that a little later because I mean, it's Fight Island, and yes, it's the merch was there and everything like that. But I mean, it didn't, and that's one of the things that I don't necessarily like about some of the UFC's presentation is they could be in Madison Square Garden or MGM Grand, Garden, or my goodness, in Abu Dhabi, and it all looks the same. And I'm just like, man, not even a palm tree. We couldn't get an artificial palm tree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, you want to create a different aesthetic from the arena that you're kind of in. Basically, make it seem unique. Yeah, I understand that mentality wholeheartedly. That was just my own personal like issue with like later on when WWE kind of got rid of sets and like it was just use the same set and just use a different graphic for whichever pay-per-view it was. So it's like I would get used, and then I would just like want to just wait for WrestleMania because I knew WrestleMania was at least going to look different, but then everything else is going to look like the same. And so I was like, but I remember back in the day when you would look at like Armageddon and see all the crashed cars and stuff like that, or like the year they did the Royal Rumble with like the courts, like, and they would open the door for every entrant that would come through for the Rumble and stuff like that. Like I always love like really unique looking sets whenever possible, like it's I don't know if I always feel like part of why we get rid of that was probably a budgetary reason, a cost-cutting measure, and I get that. It's just that it's always cool whenever you get to see something unique and something different, because New Japan still puts out some pretty good-looking sets, like like they had a pretty unique one. Well, they had to work with what they had, like because when they were doing the Cup, they shot in like two spots. One was Cork and Hall, and they shot one somewhere else. But it was the way they had Kurikan that was very different than I'm used to seeing them have Kurikan, since they didn't have the fans out there. It was pretty much a trip, and sets can definitely like add to the aesthetic of a show. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and another one of the pet peeves that I actually think that pro wrestling does a little bit better than MMA is the fact that I mean, in relation to the titles, right? So, first off, I love in pro wrestling, and maybe I'm just kind of, I grew up with pro wrestling and what have you, but the champions have their title. Even if it was The Rock dragging the title, on his side, they still appeared with the title, right? The only appearance that you see, in the UFC of the title is when Dana White essentially straps it at the end of the bout and what have you. But I'm like, for the amount of prestige and what have you, it just doesn't, to me, it doesn't sit right, and it seems like MMA promotions, kind of like from the UFC, and other companies, they've kind of adopted that. And I'm all like, nah, this person's a champion, and other than the Bruce Buffer introduction at the beginning of the match and Dana strapping on the title, you should know that this person is the champion, and this
Yeah.
this title really means something. I mean, hell, when they did the BMF title fight with Diaz and Masvidal, The Rock got to carry the title out, So there you go.
It was to make the title even more prestigious if The Rock is holding it. So there you go. That's particularly why, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, and then again with the Herb Dean deal, man. One thing that he taught me, he was just like, when I first started, I was literally setting up chairs. I was still fighting at the time. So whatever way that you can kind of plug your way in and help, not just because like you want to like get to that spot or whatever, you just want to help the promotion grow. And if you grow with the promotion or you grow with the fighter, the gym, you know they will grow with you. And that's one thing that you've done so artfully, because again, you're at this kind of weird time where Santino's isn't like physically here. It'll live in the hearts of the people who attended and the wrestling personalities that have come out of it. And I mean, Joey Chaos Munoz is like a legend, man. I remember watching him on KDOC, fighting Supreme and the Hollywood Chaos and what have you. But again, Santino's might not have a physical home at this moment, but my goodness, what you've done and others in your class, others in that pedigree, Santino lives through all of us.
It's only temporary, basically, until I think Chaos basically, made the decision just during this time. It was just safer to just not have anything go on until he feels like there's a time where we can start doing this again. Like some schools are running, good for them. Chaos is just taking as much necessary precaution as he can with this. And, Santino Brothers, as much as we love that physical school, it's like what you said, it's not about the physical place that was Santino Brothers. It's about the people who made up Santino Brothers, like Chaos, like Sylvia, like Robbie Phoenix, like Bateman, like Ruby Reyes, like everybody who's come out of there, and I think, yeah, it's like you said, the pedigree speaks for itself, and just looking at everybody who's been killing it, like, even from like the people that I know, it's just the trippiest thing, seeing like Bateman and Brody in Ring of Honor, and like seeing that like Jake Atlas is in NXT, seeing that like my good friend Alyssa Marino, she was in NXT for a little while, and it was just like the trippiest thing, because her and I started at the exact same time, and we've had very, very similar kind of like up paths, because we started at the same time and whatnot, same class. And then seeing her get to where she did, because she got to Hollywood just a couple months before I did. Then I got to Hollywood, and then she went to WWE and got to, which was the dopest thing to see, like one of us like make it. It was just like, oh, dude, I never would have guessed. Like, well, I mean, I could have guessed because everybody knew how special Alyssa was. In all honesty, it's just that I was like, man, it happened so quick, and the fact that she deserved it. She 100% deserved it because of how awesome of a human being she is and how great she is at doing whatever it is that she sets her mind to. And then like just seeing that happen, and then like the weird thing with me, just like getting the opportunities that I've had, like they've all come at interesting times, considering like with the New Japan thing, I was not expecting to like, if it was to happen, I wasn't expecting it during a time of pandemic, I'll tell you that. Because if you would have told me that like, hey, Adnan, wrestling's basically canceled from March of 2020, and the first thing you're gonna do when you're called upon is gonna be New Japan, I would have laughed in your face. Like, no, that's no way that's gonna happen. Like, and all of a sudden, like it was the trippiest thing that happened, and I was so grateful to have the opportunity to do it, and I'm hoping that it leads to more opportunities down the line with New Japan. So, but even if it's the only thing I do with New Japan, it's still something I never thought I would have done. Like period. Like it's something I wanted to do. It was my dream to do, and it's still my dream to like become a bigger part of New Japan. But like, even if that's the only time I get to be part of New Japan, it's still like something that I like so few people can say,
Yeah, absolutely. And my goodness, To me, much like Invicta is my favorite. I kind of like the things in the fringes, right? And much like Invicta, all female MMA promotion is probably one of my favorite MMA promotions right now. In terms of storytelling, New Japan has a lot of what speaks to me as a wrestling fan. The technical, aspect of it, the fact that essentially all of the storytelling get done in the ring. The whole Okada Omega, saga, or Okada and Tanahashi. My goodness. We're talking New Japan. Over the last 24 hours, there's a double champion and the IWGP Intercontinental Champion, and they. Oh, you got one. That's so
it's
great.
A pillow. It's a pillow. That's the IWGP Intercontinental Championship.
Oh, that's so great. Oh, that's so great.
I got that from when I went to the first Lions Break project that they did at the Anaheim Convention Center. I bought this pillow while I was there. So.
And now you're working for them.
Yeah, that was always the trippiest thing. To go from there to there, it was But as far as storytelling with New Japan, the thing about that is too, just speaking as somebody who's been watching New Japan for however many years, the thing I like they call themselves, which it's very true in the sense of king of sports, because New Japan still presents themselves as a sports broadcast. So the storytelling that you get out of New Japan, like you said, is in the ring, but it's also just through your backstage interviews. It's stuff like that. It's very press conference based. It's not a lot of you don't need skits. Sure, you get maybe some of that super occasionally, especially stuff with Toru Yano, on his YouTube channel or something like that. But it's mostly about it's the storytelling is simple because you don't need to overcomplicate storytelling. You can have a really complicated wrestling storyline if it's good, but I think the problem is that sometimes we try to overcomplicate things, where in New Japan it's just simple. I want to be the best, and that guy with that belt, he's the best, or that guy with this tag team with these belts, they're the best. It's relatively simple. Or I want to win this tournament because it shows me that I'm the. And tournaments too, they hold so many tournaments that it's always compelling too. There's almost never a time that New Japan has a tournament that's not compelling, this was one of the most interesting New Japan Cups we've ever had, because we had the situation where we had the brackets originally announced, then everything closed down. So then those brackets got scrapped because we couldn't get everybody over to Japan. So we had to make some new brackets, open weight up the tournament. So now we have heavyweights and junior heavyweights, and you have the young lions who get to showcase their talent. We got 32 competitors, and it was a very solid New Japan Cup. I think it was filled with a lot of cool twists and turns. I think a lot of guys got an opportunity to shine who don't normally get an opportunity to shine like that at that particular level. I think in particular, I don't think enough people talked about El Desperado. He went out in the first round to Ishii, but that match with Ishii showed that Desperado has always kind of been one of those underrated junior heavyweights. And then here's this awesome match he had with a high caliber heavyweight like Tomohiro Ishii, because quite honestly, I don't think Tomohiro Ishii has had a bad match in 10 years. But that's just me personally.
No. He's a Stone Pitbull for a reason. My goodness, just the aura that he has, and almost a demure version of. I'm not comparing him, but in terms of just having that kind of aura, you think of Tanahashi, you think of Okada, think about Shinsuke Nakamura, one of my all-time favorites, Ishii just has this aura of almost if you're going to compare it to American, WWF wrestling, almost like Hardcore Holly, or that kind of just hard edge, take no BS type dude, and that you're always into a fight. It doesn't matter if he's on the opening match of the card. It doesn't matter if he's in the main event. You're going to get your money's worth out of Tomohiro Ishii, and my goodness.
Well, the cool thing is, I remember I've talked to another friend of mine about how awesome Ishii is because he's a guy who's also a great example of less is more, and there's nothing wrong with guys who do a lot of different stuff or whatnot, but Ishii gets so much out of a very basic move set because everything he does is super believable. He's not a guy who's out there who's doing moonsaults or stuff like that, but you watch that guy chop somebody, you watch that guy clothesline somebody, you're like, that guy's real. And that's the thing that makes a guy like Tomohiro Ishii like so compelling to watch, is that you feel everything that he puts in. That's what always made also Tanahashi very compelling to me, is that he makes you believe, man. He's out there making people cry with just the way that he's out there and giving it all his heart. I think Kevin Kelly on commentary hit it so perfectly during the New Japan Cup during this, because like when he lost to Taichi, it's like Tanahashi is struggling out there because he can't feed off the emotion of the people, since there was no fans out there, and he's having this match and Taichi's beating the snot out of him. He's got no energy to feed off of, and Tana is a guy who thrives on the energy of the people, and that's 100% true. And like it's been a very interesting and compelling time to watch, you know, New Japan at the moment, and just to be a part of that now with what we're doing with Lions Break Collision. You know, I think it was a good idea to put some spotlight on people who haven't seen more, and then as well as the LA Dojo and stuff like that, as well as a couple of talents who couldn't make it out to Japan. I think it's really excellent stuff, like honestly, because you know I was there when we were, you know, obviously shooting it, but to see it kind of put together in the package that it is, nicely wrapped up in the bow, I really liked the way that it was done. I think everybody involved did a fantastic job putting it together. The Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, like team, as far as like camera people and production and stuff like that, is always top notch, and that's just kind of proof of that too. So they obviously had a big contributing factor into how it was shot and looked. And then I don't know who edited and stuff. It was New Japan people or whatnot. I don't know the specific basics, you know. I just know that whatever they did with it, it looks great. The 2 episodes that are out should absolutely, like, if you haven't yet, you should definitely check out the Lions Break Collisions episode. They look really good.
Yeah, and you know, we were talking about the difference of aesthetics. You know, that was it. You know, Dave could have just as easily, you know, especially there aren't a whole lot of production studios, let alone wrestling, you know, that have full scale production at their fingertips, and he could have just had presented that Championship Wrestling from Hollywood ambiance and whatever. But you know, the partnership between Dave Marquez and New Japan Pro Wrestling, it seemed just, it melded so perfectly, and the different aesthetic that, you know, I love the details, you know, like you felt like it was, you know, yes, we're not in Japan, but this was a New Japan product. You know, the turnbuckle pads were different, everything was different, the aesthetics, you knew this was a New Japan product. I loved it. You know, and just the way that they present it, you know, when you're talking about storytelling, you know, I mean, I think it just goes back, you know, you're heavily involved with the Young Lions program, and you know, obviously the LA Dojo has happened here for the second iteration here in LA.
Right.
You know, the first one in the 2000s, but just that, you know, the Lions. To me, I think, like, you know, the Young Lions program is almost like how the Ultimate Fighter is for MMA, right? Where the first time that people get to get eyes on this particular, you know, athlete, you know, and they aren't as polished as they would be, you know, in later years and what have you. And they could potentially be cornerstones of their respective companies, their respective sports. But you know, like, we're bringing you on the ground level to what could potentially be a superstar. You know, you get to see that lightning in a bottle, literally, as it's getting jarred.
It's really cool, is like, especially in retrospect, when you look back on how successful the Young Lions program has been. Like, if you look at like the VTR that played, not for this year's Naito Okada match, but I think the most recent one at the Tokyo Dome, where they show like you know, it's Naito and Okada. It was, I think, I forgot if it was last year or the year before. I think it was the year before, 2018. So Naito and Okada is the main event, and they show the clip of the match that they had when they were Young Lions, and Naito making Okada tap out to the Boston Crab, which is the Young Lion finish, but that's them as Young Lions. And then there they are headlining the Tokyo Dome and stuff like that. And you look at a guy also like, well, I remember watching as a Young Lion. I remember actually going to see him in Ring of Honor during Excursion too. Jay White, you know, Jay White was, you know, straight up Young Lion. Then he became a guy in Ring of Honor to polish up and whatnot, craft, and he was good. And then he went back to Japan, and he became, you know, the new Gaijin ace in a lot of degrees, you know, going back to Japan. Like, you know, the Young Lions program has been super cool, and I'm very excited for the likes of seeing Master Wato, because I was a big fan of Hirai Kawato when he was a young lion, and to see him come back from CMLL and absolutely kill it, I think, in the match with Doki. I think he looked fantastic, and I was like, Master Wato is going to be someone I think to look at going forward in the junior heavyweight division. Carl Fredericks is just freshly graduated. No excursion for Carl. We're just going. It looks like it's just going to be up to the heavyweight type division with him as being seen in Lions Break Collision, seeing him with his new gear, and now he's young lion no more. And then we'll see hopefully later on maybe the same thing with Clark Connors and Alex Coughlin. Only time will tell what we're going to do with them, but for sure I'm very excited for the futures of guys like Carl Fredericks and guys like Master Wato to see how far they're going to go, now that their post young lion phase is done. It's very exciting. I think it's worked out very well for New Japan. As the proof is in the pudding, as you can totally see.
Yeah, man. And again, even those young lion matches, whether they happen here or, in Japan at the Tokyo Dome, or some of the other, obviously not everything gets to be at the Tokyo Dome. We're talking Sumo Hall and all of the other venues around Japan. But I mean, the storytelling, that's where they learn the art. You've only got, a certain amount of moves. You've only gotten a certain amount of moves to kind of pull off. And, this is what you have to do to find your way to win. And even that excursion deal, the fact that, you could look, you go to America, you go to Mexico, get different looks, you work for different promotions. And, like some of the coolest things, like watching maybe the early 2000 era of Yuji Nagata, right? French, he obviously, when he was a young lion himself, went on excursion to WCW, whatever. And then, he's the top hand in New Japan, and seeing guys like, Tana and obviously Nakamura as young lions, kind of, icing the back of Nagata. And it's just like, it's cool. You feel so much more invested, in them and their success and their failure than you would otherwise.
It was the craziest thing, because I just went back and I just watched Manabu Nakanishi versus Hiroshi Tanahashi at Korakuen Hall, the only time that the IWGP Heavyweight Championship ever changed hands in Korakuen Hall. And I'm looking at like a young lion Yoshihashi in that match and stuff like that. Like, it's just like the weirdest thing is that if you go back and look at older New Japan matches, like even just a couple of years ago, look at around who the young lions are. And you're like, oh, that person's like, they're Sho and Yo. They're Roppongi 3K now. They've been killing it as a junior tag team, and stuff like that. It's just the most interesting thing is just like spot the young lion and see how well they've done,
Yeah, man. But again, I mean, you in essence are a young lion, a couple of years in the business, and again, it's not just New Japan. We spend a lot of time on it, and I mean, I guess the one little tidbit that we should say is, yes, there's a new IWGP Intercontinental Champion and World Heavyweight Champion in Evil, which presents a whole list of things, because obviously the rematch with Okada, you could do an inner kind of a stable rivalry between him and Switchblade. Yeah, you could do Jake White. You could do Naito.
You can do
there's
Naito,
just so many.
Sonata. It opens up a realm of possibilities now that Evil is the IWGP Heavyweight Intercontinental Champion. It looks like Hiromu Takahashi is going to be, who's been an absolutely shining bit ever since he's come back from his broken neck, could be a guy who's going to fight Evil relatively soon, which is great. It's really nice seeing a lot of the interplay that's happened with, like, I think one of the most positive things that's come out of the quarantine era for New Japan is seeing a lot of the juniors go one-on-one with the heavies and stuff like that. So if Hiromu's going to have more matches with heavies as the junior heavyweight champion, I'm all for it, honestly.
Man, and just like the potential of Takahashi taking it all, and he walking away with like the junior heavyweight, the Intercontinental, and the heavyweight champion. That almost, kind of it goes in a bit of nostalgia for me, because that's the first time I saw Ultimo Dragon in WCW. He had like 8 different title belts, and I was just like, this dude.
He was like J Crown or something, and there's that iconic picture of him with like 12 belts. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of
So
the coolest pictures in wrestling history. If there's anyone who loves pro wrestling and is watching this right now and you don't know Ultimo Dragon, one, you should be ashamed of yourself. And two, just look up this picture of Ultimo Dragon holding all of these championships. Like it's like an NWA light heavyweight championship, the WCW cruiserweight championship. I think the IWGP junior heavyweight championship's in there. He's got
mhm.
12. He's holding 12 at once because Ultimo Dragon was the man.
Yeah,
Still
and
is
I
the
mean
man, from what I understand.
yeah, and the it was actually a WWF, the precursor to the WWF light heavyweight championship,
Yeah,
but
the
essentially it
title
was
history of it, yeah, was
right.
mostly in
I mean,
Japan.
essentially it was the same WWF title that both Dynamite Kid and Tiger Mask, the original Tiger Mask, had traded in those historic contests that they did in the 80s.
Those matches are so ahead of their time because I finally have watched like the Dynamite Kid and original Tiger Mask matches, and you're like, this is where the modern day style kind of comes from, or matches like this, because those guys were changing the game back then. If you look at like early Owen Hart and Jushin Liger, you're like, man, this is where some of this like that kind of wrestling evolved from, and it's even stuff that even then you look back and you're like, some guys still aren't doing some of these things that they were doing, and it's a crazy thing to see, just like how ahead of their time those guys were during that time,
Absolutely. I mean, there's a reason why the very first match on the newly minted WCW Monday Nitro and the Mall of America was Brian Pillman versus Jushin Thunder Liger. Of
Right.
course, what else? What can follow that?
It's very hard to follow that. Thankfully, I only have to say their name, so I don't have to follow any of it myself. So
there it is. Now, obviously, you've also done work with the NWA promotion. We've seen the YouTube NWA Power has kind of expanded. I mean, my goodness, I've got an NWA replica signed by the great Holly
10
Race.
pounds of gold. Yep.
Yeah, man, 10 pounds of gold. Obviously, you were born of a different era, but I mean, obviously, the synonymous nature of the NWA title and everybody that has competed to him all. I mean, when you look at from Pat O'Connor on down, or even Buddy Rogers on down, I mean, all first ballot Hall of Famers, right? And then now you're announcing the current iteration, Nick Aldis. And Nick Aldis, I mean, a product of arguably the greatest, for my money, the greatest NWA heavyweight champion of all time, the king of sports himself, the King Harley Race. So, I mean, how do you feel? That's got to be a really cool deal.
That was like the early moments of what is going on with my life, is when I was able to do the NWA title, because that's chalked up for being a part of Championship Wrestling from Hollywood and their partnership with the NWA, and stuff like that. And I remember, Nick Aldis walking in with the 10 pounds of gold and stuff like that. And by the way, if you've never met Nick Aldis up close, he is a very handsome man. It's like, it's ridiculous. It's like, I hate you just because you're so handsome, and I wish I could be that handsome. I love Nick. He's cool with it. But like, that was because the first time I did the NWA Championship was Coastline Clash 2018. And that was Aldis in the triple threat against Josephus and Crimson. And that was May of 2018. So I still wasn't even in a year yet. I was only like 7-8 months into being a ring announcer. And I remember thinking, how is it I'm doing the NWA Championship? That was like definitely one of the biggest like crowning moments. And I've gotten to do an NWA Championship match again. So I've done 2 NWA title matches for introduction. I've introduced Nick Aldis a couple of additional times, just not for the championship. I've done it for the championship twice. I've also done the national championship a couple times. I've gotten the chance to do the women's championship a couple times. I've introduced the tag champions once, but not during a title match. But like otherwise, like that was an early taste of just like, because at the time I was thinking, I'm all like, well, if I'm already doing stuff with the NWA, there's no way. Like I already felt like I'd peaked, and really there's even more to go. And the NWA had this great resurgence that I hope that like whenever things are able to come down, because NWA Power is a great product. I think it's another great flavor in wrestling in this Baskin Robbins that we've had over the last like 5 years. Like where if you whatever flavor of wrestling that you like if you like that old school style, the NWA is still around, and honestly they've been putting out some great stuff over the last couple of years since the launch of Power. And and even before then, when you look at the stuff that they were doing, using promotions like Championship Wrestling from Hollywood as a vehicle before they finally got their own studio again, stuff like that, like building the NWA back up with the 10 pounds of gold, I think was a good idea. I think it was good for everyone. But like, yeah, the NWA was definitely an important step in my wrestling journey. I was never officially signed to them. All of the things I got to do were because of my affiliation with Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. Who knows? Like maybe if one day I get the opportunity to do the NWA proper, then yeah, it's one I would love to do. But it's still, up there that I've been able to do so many of the NWA's championships and work with guys like Billy Corgan, and stuff like Nick Aldis and all these important figures in wrestling, thanks to the opportunities that I was given. It can't be understated enough, like how important Championship Wrestling from Hollywood was for me getting that particular opportunity, as well as getting my opportunity with Impact Wrestling, because when Impact came to California, the United Wrestling Network was very involved into putting those shows together and whatnot, as far as like a joint promotion type thing. So that's why also, if you look at those shows I were on, there's a few talents who weren't a part of Impact that were part of those shows, like Adrian Quest and Danny Limelight. And then Chris Bay, who would eventually get signed by Impact, which is dope because I love Chris Bay, and him and Willie Mack are going to kill it at Slammiversary. It's definitely it's those opportunities. I think I can't necessarily take full credit for, in the aspect of like, yes, I put in the work and whatnot, but I helped. I had some help along the way from the people I was around, good word of mouth, the people who I was associated with, stuff like that. And it's just a matter of, what is it, like luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So that's what's happened a lot with what's gone on with me. The New Japan thing, though, was totally different in the aspect of like, that was a text message I got from a number I didn't know, and it was just like, oh, okay, that was a thing. And so I was like, cool. And so I immediately hopped on that opportunity. But like, yeah, I'd say the work I've had the opportunity of doing with the United Wrestling Network over the past almost over 2 years I've been with Championship Wrestling from Hollywood's been a big contributing factor into, one, helping me get a lot of opportunities, and two, polishing me for those opportunities and making me grow as a ring announcer. Because I look back at the first episode I did, and it's not the same as like the last episode I did, as far as like the announcing I do,
No, that's definitely some growth. And I mean, the last time that I wish I had definitely gone out to more Championship Wrestling from Hollywood shows, but if I'm not mistaken, I mean, the last time I went was when Cody had just won the NWA Championship from Nick Aldis at All In, right? And
we had him there for an appearance. He had the promo with Dave Marquez where he was talking about his possible free agency, and then he has that moment with Peter where Peter confronts him, and then Peter gets hit with the crossroads. So yeah, that was a cool moment. Dave Marquez got the honors of introducing Cody, but it was still cool being like, there ringside for this moment where Cody is there. And that was that moment too, where Cody was holding 3 belts, which a lot of people also don't realize that Evil is technically a triple champion right now, because they haven't vacated the never openweight 6-man titles yet. But so Evil technically has 3 belts, but Cody had 3 belts at that moment too, because at that moment Cody was the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, the IWGP United States Champion, and 1/3 of the Ring of Honor 6-man champions. And I was like, Cody's got 3 belts right now. He only showed up to the building with the NWA title, but I was just thinking about he was on top of the world at that moment. And I was thinking it was funny if I was Cody, I would have explained you see this belt? This belt says I'm the best wrestler in the entire world. You see this belt? This belt says that I'm the best wrestler in the United States according to the country of Japan. And you see this belt? This belt says I'm really good at teaming up with 2 other people. Stuff like that.
Man, I wish you were booking, that would have been great. That would have been great.
That's all I would have Cody said. I just want you to say this because it's going to make me laugh, okay?
Yeah, man. And it's crazy. I mean, and I was there, and that's where I went like total mark, because I'm all like, oh my gosh, like I was standing right behind Hannah from doing the Orton podcast, and her dad, who are incredible.
Oh
And
yeah. Those two, yeah.
yeah, and I was just like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And then I'm all like, oh, it's Cody. Oh, it's Dusty's son. Oh, Dusty's son has the NWA title, the same one that his dad. And I was just like, ah, ah, ah. And I was like, dude, your dad would be so proud. And that's all I could muster. Like all of the interviews that I've done, all the podcasts, then it was presented with Cody and the history. Like it was just like it was heavy. Like that was probably like the heaviest moment like that I've experienced in wrestling, like face to face. It was just like, man, Luthez, like Buddy Roberts, Luthez, all of the people, whatever, and it's now Cody, and his dad also held the same title, and yeah, man, it was, and then even like the fact that Dave Marquez, who I credit to. I mean, obviously, when you look at the first iteration of the LA Dojo, he was instrumental in obviously helping and fortifying that brand here in the U.S. And when you look at guys like Brian Danielson or Daniel Bryan, Shinsuke Nakamura, Carl Anderson, there's a litany of guys that came from or under that tutelage. And the fact that Dave Marquez is back with New Japan, back with NWA, I think it's really cool. It's really cool. And it seems like we've lost the dashing one. So don't know what I don't know what happened. Don't know what happened. But thank you guys. You guys are awesome. We've been going about 40 minutes, and it's been a nonstop kind of cavalcade of wrestling history with the dashing Adnan Kureishy. Hopefully he joins back on. We'll give him a couple minutes, and if not, then yeah, we might end it. No, I don't want to end it. Not yet. Not yet. So let's see. Let's see if he joins back up. Let's see. I might have to end it. Oh, man. Parting is such sweet sorrow, but thank you guys. That was According to Woods with the dashing one, Adnan Kureishy, and we're out. Thank you guys.